Well, hold on a second. Joe Biden says he has no regrets about his presidency? Well, yeah, sure. If you don't remember it, how could you regret it? Coming up on the Vince Colonnade Show, Luke Rosiak is going to be with us as the Biden administration is trying to salt the earth before Trump arrives. We'll talk to him about that. Ralph Norman, the congressman from South Carolina, joins us at 4:30. We'll talk about the latest in the big spending battles on Capitol Hill. Why are there spending battles at all on Capitol Hill? This should be easy. And then Josh Hammer is with us from the Article 3 Project as a court in Georgia smacks big fat Fannie Willis and says, your time is done. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yeah, a lot of breaking news. Hey, apparently Joe Biden just did an interview with something called the Midas Touch Network. This is just I believe, a full-blown left-wing activist operation. I think that's all it is. So, of course, the White House sat Biden down with them today, or recently. They released the video today. And here is Biden saying moments ago that he has no regrets whatsoever about anything.
Any other regrets that you have? Anything you wish you would have done differently?
Well, I guess if I thought a lot about it, it'd be something I would have specifically done, but not generically.
What? Not generically? No regrets? If I thought about it at all, maybe something specifically? You know? Wendell Hosebo over at Breitbart News shares that clip, and he points out, what about the Afghan withdrawal, the deadly Afghan withdrawal? No regrets about that? You know, you have 13 families of American service members who are waiting to hear you say you regret that, and no word out of you on that. You don't regret the out-of-control inflation? Nothing? No regrets about that? You don't regret kicking the border open? Any concern about that? You don't regret the lawfare against President Trump? You don't regret failing to protect President Trump? Nothing? Nothing? Do you regret debating him? Do you regret going onto that debate stage and demonstrating to the world that you should not be president of the United States? Do you regret lying to us about Hunter Biden? Do you regret that at all? Any regrets whatsoever? No? So Joe Biden today saying to the so-called Midas Touch Network that he has no regrets. No regrets. Meanwhile, we've got a lot of coverage right now coming out now that the Biden administration has concluded about just how senile the guy is and how incapable he has been of being president of the United States now 40 years. It's been the case, including during the 2020 election. Let me go through some of what we know. There have been a pair of reports on this subject just in the last 24 hours, one from the New York Times, one from the Wall Street Journal. The New York Times describes Biden as, quote, weary. A weary Biden heads for the exit. A weary Biden heads for the exit. And in the piece, it basically includes White House aides who are finally telling the truth about Joe. And, you know, they've got his chief of staff in the piece, Jeff Zients, claiming that the president wants to, quote, sprint to the finish line in the coming weeks. But people who are close to Biden have observed a slower, more tired president. The New York Times writes the following, quote, he looks a little older and a little slower with each passing day. Aides say he remains plenty sharp in the Situation Room, calling world leaders to broker a ceasefire in Lebanon or deal with the chaos of Syria's rebellion. But it is hard to imagine that he seriously thought he could do the world's most stressful job for another 4 years. During Biden's trip to the Amazon rainforest in November last month, those close to the president on his travels noticed an increase in his, quote, fragility. After giving remarks on the trip, the president turned and walked down a dirt path behind the lectern. You remember this? Did you see him with that lectern? He whirls around and walks down a dirt path. People are like, where's he going? Doesn't look like he's going anywhere. It looks like he's just like disappearing into the woods like a mythical creature. He's returning. It left several people in the audience not used to seeing him up close, holding their breath and concerned that the 82-year-old would trip, according to the New York Times. Aides told the outlet that the president's gait was no more unsteady than usual. Oh, that's not good. Shortly after that, in December, the president took a trip to Angola where he was scheduled to visit the National Museum of Slavery, Upon attendance, artifacts were brought out to the president for him to see because there was fear he couldn't climb the stairs in the building, two people familiar with the planning said. The New York Times notes that the White House said the president did not go inside because of logistical reasons. Yeah, the logistical reason is he's incapable of doing stairs. That's the logistical reason. Others who often have traveled with the president, or who did during those two trips, noted to the New York Times that the 82-year-old man often mumbles and is hard to understand, while his schedule was kept rather light for that trip. The outlet reported that during one private meeting, the president began to reminisce about the 1960 debate between former presidents John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. In the final weeks, Biden made the decision to pardon his son, Hunter, after insisting for months he would not. The move was, of course, met with backlash from both sides of the aisle, leaving the president with anger that Democrats in Congress even publicly voiced their opposition to the choice, according to one person spending time with Biden recently. So there's that. So the New York Times has a whole piece on how much Biden is slowing down. He's so fragile. And then there's the new piece this morning in the Wall Street Journal, which says that throughout Biden's presidency, a small group of aides has had to stick close to Biden to assist him, especially when traveling or speaking to the public. Quote, they body him to such a high degree, body being a verb here for they manage him. He's got a body man, but he's got a lot of body people around him. They body him to such a high degree, said a person who witnessed it, adding that the, quote, hand-holding is unlike anything other recent presidents have had. The president's slide has been hard to overlook, the Wall Street Journal reports today. While preparing last year for his interview with Robert K. Hur, the special counsel who investigated Biden's handling of classified documents, the president could not recall lines that his team had discussed with him. Okay, do you understand what they're saying? This isn't the actual conversation with Robert Hur. They're saying when they pretended to have the conversation with Robert Hur, when they practiced what that conversation would be, when Robert Hur arrived, he was having trouble recalling his lines during practice. They practiced with him for Robert Hur to come in, and he failed at practice. At events, aides would often repeat instructions to him, such as where to enter or exit a stage, things that would be obvious to an average person. Biden's team tapped campaign co-chairman Jeffrey Katzenberg, a Hollywood mogul, to find a voice coach to improve the president's fading warble. They hired a voice coach. Now, don't you think this would be relevant to you if Joe Biden, assuming at this point that this was at some point that Joe Biden was still on the ticket, isn't this relevant to the American voter? Heck, isn't it relevant to Americans everywhere that the president of the United States can't even speak? They hired a voice coach to teach him how to speak in his failing state? That kind of seems like a big deal. It's a big deal. And yet, no, you didn't find that out until now, until after the election. They hired a voice coach to try and get him to be audible. In the fall of 2023, Biden faced that major test when Robert Hur, the special counsel, wanted to interview him. The president wanted to do it, and his top aides felt that his willingness to sit down with investigators set up a favorable contrast with Trump, who stonewalled the probe into why classified documents appeared at Mar-a-Lago, according to people familiar with the sessions. The prep sessions took about 3 hours a day for about a week ahead of the interview. 3 hours a day for an entire week. Wait, this is the president of the United States. And we were told that this is a guy who doesn't start his day until 10 a.m. He's done it 4 p.m., so that's a grand total of 6 available hours for him to president. And 3 of those hours per day for an entire week were consumed with practice sessions where he pretended to be speaking to Robert Hur for an entire week, 7 days. So 21 hours of just sitting around practicing. So during those sessions, Biden's energy levels were up and down, the Wall Street Journal reports today. He couldn't recall his lines that his team had previously discussed with him, the person said. Yeah, and then the Wall Street Journal further reports that he failed when Robert Hur arrived. He couldn't remember his talking points as Robert Hur was asking him questions. So that's where we are. That's where we are. So the truth is coming out, and of course, this is nowhere near close to all of it. Who's really calling the shots? I mean, one of the things the Wall Street Journal emphasizes today is that almost none of the cabinet members had any FaceTime with Joe. He would barely speak to cabinet members. Barely. Lloyd Austin used to be a part of a weekly briefing. He would come in once a week, and then that petered off to the point that Lloyd Austin barely sees Joe Biden anymore. He almost never has cabinet meetings, ever. Almost never meets with members of his cabinet. Almost never speaks with Democrats. Almost never speaks with members of Congress. They just hide him away. They hide him away. And now that the election's over, all of this is coming out. Oh, yeah, he's just been an absentee president. He's not even really involved. And instead, you get people like Jake Sullivan and all of the other goons at the White House. They handle the job of the president of the United States in his stead because he's incapable of doing it. And then they manage him, as they said here, they body him. They body him. They tightly control everything about him. He takes the short stairs up the plane. They walk close to him so you can't see him stumble. All of those things. And then when it comes to interviews and media, which Biden rarely ever did throughout the course of his presidency, we get an update today from MSNBC host Stephanie Ruhle, who admits that during the course of an interview she had with Joe Biden, she had asked about Hunter. And the team, Biden's team, jumped in and began waving in front of the camera and going absolutely crazy and tried to stop the entire interview. Think about this. Stephanie Ruhle is about as friendly an interviewer you could possibly find for Joe Biden. Here she is reliving that moment, only telling you after the election's over.
When I interviewed President Biden, they gave me 10 minutes, okay? A politician can knock out one answer in 15 minutes. And
Oh, for sure.
20 minutes before we went in, Savannah Guthrie and I were on the phone. She was the last person she had interviewed President Trump, and her advice was, the person you're interviewing isn't the person you're up against, it's the clock. She's like, 10 minutes? Like, you're getting 3 questions in tops. We probably had 40 questions ready. At minute 9.5, I asked the president, your son Hunter might be indicted by your Department of Justice. How will this impact your presidency? A completely reasonable question. As soon as I said those words, President Biden's team waved in front of the camera, started screaming and yelling, and stopped the interview. Now, that immediately went on. That's public record.
Yeah.
That was in the transcript. That became its own story, and then they punished us. Right? We ended up going 14 minutes, and then NBC was in the box, and we were in trouble forever. I interviewed VP Harris, and they gave us 15 minutes. We ended up getting 25. However, in those completely structured environments, you never have a human moment. And this is the thing about Donald Trump. Love him or hate him, and when I say he keeps it real, but he's lying. People know what they're getting, and they're tired of polished politicians giving them sound bites. And you can see it in the way that they're tired of the way they consume media.
Okay, so you heard something. Stephanie Ruhle said something in that clip. First of all, she's revealing this to you meaningfully for the first time, that there was all this interference when she attempted to ask a simple question about Hunter. If you go back to the actual date of that event, May 6th of 2023, Mediaite has a story at the time about this. And the headline is, "Our audio was messed up. MSNBC's Ruhle had to ask Biden her Hunter question twice in unaired interview cut." What? And here's what they say. On Friday night's 10th hour edition of MSNBC's The 11th Hour, whatever that means, Ruhle saved the awkward subject for last. But according to an embargoed transcript of the exchange, she had to ask the question twice and get the president to repeat his answer on the sensitive issue because of an apparent audio snafu. This is how Mediaite described it at the time. They didn't say because White House officials dove in front of the camera began waving and trying to shut it down. Here's the transcript. Ruhle, you're also facing something personal. And while there's no ties to you, your own son could be charged by your Department of Justice. Oh, my gosh. Just listen to the amount of deference that she's giving to Joe's version of events. The transcript continues. Unknown is credited here. Off mic. That's all it says. It just says off mic in parentheses. Ruhle, how will that impact your presidency? Biden, it will not because he has done nothing wrong, and I'm proud of him. And now in parentheses, crosstalk. Ruhle, just since they were talking, sir, just can I ask you that again because you gave your answer, but our audio was messed up. Can I just ask you that again? You don't have to answer, if I may. Sir, there is something personal that's affecting you. She starts over. Your son, while there's no ties to you, could be charged by your Department of Justice. How will that impact your presidency? Biden, first of all, my son has done nothing wrong. I trust him. I have faith in him. It impacts my presidency by making me feel proud of him. That's what Biden responded with. When the interview aired, Mediaite notes, the portion containing Biden's first answer and Ruhle's re-asking had been excised. They yanked it entirely. So in that clip, Ruhle was insisting we were transparent. We showed everybody that. We got in big trouble with the White House because we revealed all of that. No, you didn't. None of that happened. None of that happened. You chalked it up to an audio error. There was an audio error. Sorry. Whoops. Let's try that question again. You covered up for the White House stooges who attempted to stop you from asking a softball version of an important question. It's pathetic. And now, of course, only being revealed since the Biden presidency is effectively over. All right, coming up, we'll be chatting with Luke Rosiak from the Daily Wire about the Biden administration's last-ditch efforts to salt the earth ahead of President Trump's arrival. Can that be stopped? Also, speaking of that, we may have an update for you on that border wall auction, the Biden administration trying to sell the pieces off before President Trump gets back into office. But things might be looking up. We'll tell you in a moment. Hey there. It is now 3:35 News Talk, 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, Congressman Ralph Norman joins us for an update on whether or not this here government's going to shut down. That's at 4:30. And then at 5 o'clock, Josh Hammer is here from the Article 3 Project as Fannie Willis is tossed off the case against Donald Trump in Georgia. It's a good day for, well, that makes it a good day, I think. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The quest to stop President Trump and his agenda definitely continues, though. The Biden administration is actively hiring political activists to infiltrate the federal government and to resist the mandate that President Trump was just elected with. Joining me now to discuss, Luke Rosiak is here. He's an investigative reporter for the Daily Wire and also the author of the great book, Race to the Bottom, Uncovering the Secret Forces Destroying American Public Education. Luke, great to have you back with us, sir.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so in these waning weeks of the Biden administration, they're doing a lot of hiring. Why are they doing hiring, and to what jobs?
Yeah, I heard about how they were auctioning off pieces of the border wall and signing union contracts through 2029. So I decided to look at usajobs.gov, which is the website where you can find where you can apply to government jobs.
Yeah.
And they've got up to 1,200 jobs open right now where they're currently either in the process of deciding who to hire, or you can submit your resume today for these diversity-related positions like DEI advocates and things like that. So yeah, these are generally career civil servant jobs that are going to be inherited by the Trump administration, even though he has no say in choosing the people, and even though he said he doesn't intend for the government to be in this business of DEI. Mm-hmm. These salaries are up to $310,000 each. Many of the jobs are working from home. And when you add up the salaries of these 1,200 jobs, we're talking about $160 million a year.
And that industry, the DEI industry, its express purpose is to advance racial prejudice. Who do you think, if you had to take a wild guess, the average DEI employee would vote for? Yeah, I mean, I think you put it very well in the opening of the segment. I mean, these are inherently left-wing people,
And I think what we're going to start to see is maybe they change their job titles or they move people around and transfer them, and they say, well, we're abolishing your position, but you can still work somewhere else. And I think that's where you really see it, that these people are who they are. They applied for these DEI jobs to begin with because they are motivated by a desire to do activism and left-wing activism. And as long as they're in the federal government, they're basically probably going to be trying to subvert the will of the president if they feel like that goes against their calling.
And these are because, they're federal jobs. They're not political appointees. The reason for this is to, like, in terms of what comes along with that, they will be able to stay in those gigs until President Trump figures out a way to make it easier to fire them?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and some of these jobs are very high level, even though they're career. Like one of them is on November 15th, the Department of Health and Human Services advertised for a Deputy Assistant Secretary for Minority Health, where the job description is your job is promoting health equity and serving as the principal advisor to the secretary on minority health issues. So Trump is going to get his own health secretary in there, but this guy is basically reporting directly to, RFK Jr. or whoever the secretary winds up being, and they're chosen by the Biden administration, and their whole job is to advocate for something that's, potentially opposed to the sort of ideology that Trump wants. A number of these positions have advocacy in the title. They say your job is to advocate for DEI and things like that. And so, yeah, I mean, these are jobs that maybe Schedule F is one way. Schedule F would say any job that has to do with policy advocacy or policy making. We call it something called Schedule F, where the president can replace them. These people, if they're hired right now, they might wind up getting fired in a couple of months. That might be easy to do because they're going to be on their probationary period. And then there's also the issue of if you just dissolve the position entirely, that's potentially a separate issue where you don't have to go through that burdensome firing process. But these 1,200 positions are all on top of the thousands of other DEI employees who are already in the federal government. So certainly he's going to have his work, Trump is going to have his work cut out for him. And, being in charge of the executive branch, you're not really in charge unless the employees are working for your priorities. And so this is going to be a key issue for him for sure.
Yes. You point out in your reporting today that the jobs that you're talking about, these 1,200 available jobs, have annual salaries of up to $310,000. They could add up to a total salary payouts of $160 million a year. And I'm thinking about all this and going, man, like, first of all, these kinds of jobs require no actual intellectual knowledge of whatsoever. They're like, it's just, honestly, it's just mindless extremism. And you're being paid really, really high salaries to have these gigs. Like, holy cow. Can you even believe that jobs like this exist?
I was honestly shocked by it, and I published a whole database of all 1,200 jobs. You can see it on thedailywire.com, and you can actually sort it by salary or by date listed. And it's amazing how seemingly low-level jobs are paying $181,000 a year, often working from home. And it really gets to the question of, are these people doing anything at all? I mean, you kind of alluded to it. And so the Secret Service, of course, which failed to protect Donald Trump from an attempted assassination attempt, has a big DEI unit, and it's currently hiring an editor. So your job is to edit, and by the way, they spelled editor wrong in the job posting's title. They wanted an editor with ER at the end, so I guess they do need an editor. But it raises the issue of, like, you've got this whole group of people working for the Secret Service that don't know how to read or write, and they're not doing anything to protect the president, and meanwhile the president is being shot at. So I think we have to acknowledge money is finite. It just is. And anytime you're spending money on a position like this, it's taking away a role from someone who would actually be doing something useful. Another example is the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute, which I never heard of before, but they have a whole website, and literally they just create posters of, like, it seems like it's something out of the movie Office Space, like these cheesy posters that'll have like a cat on it and be like, diversity is important. And like, that's their job. So they're hiring a social media specialist right now. Salary is $113,000 a year, working from home. So I said, well, what are their social media posts? Well, they do about one social media post a day, and it does something like tell the military members to affirm Native voices. So for one social media post a day, you can get $113,000 working from home. This is not doing anything to keep our country safe.
No. Instead, all it's doing is advancing leftist claptrap that divides people instead of brings them together. It's kind of amazing, actually, that that's the case. So these job postings, you write that the hiring window for many of these jobs closes before Donald Trump takes office. In other words, they're rushing to get people into these positions.
Yeah, I believe all of them close before Trump takes office. And I think the window where they accept resumes is usually about 2 weeks. So that's probably typical.
Okay.
But what you saw is a big rush to hire. I mean, right in the 10 days after the election, they listed 33 of these jobs. A lot of the other jobs, the window may have recently closed, and now they say they're in the process of actually choosing out of their many applicants who they're going to fill. So they're literally currently in the process of choosing the person who's going to get this job. And certainly the goal is to embed in the federal workforce. And, you got to see this whole chart on dailywire.com because it's just endless. Another example, Securities and Exchange Commission, which, by the way, a bunch of stockbrokers, you don't really think there's like a big like race angle there or like a lot of oppression, right? I mean, it's if you got stock, you can probably be of any race, but you're probably rich if you're dealing with the SEC. But they've got a supplier diversity office, and they're hiring an employee there at $251,000 a year to make sure that, they purchase paper clips from a company that is, Native American or whatever. Even entry-level jobs are paying way above the median household income in America. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, another agency that doesn't seem like it has a whole lot to do with race, but it does seem like it's probably important to national security, is hiring a recent graduate to be a diversity data analyst for $89,000 a year. So this is a ton of money for essentially these almost farcical make-work jobs.
Yeah, you're right. In some ways they're farcical, and I would, in an ideal world, worth just laughing off. But the reality, unfortunately, of these jobs, especially the ones that are involved in like acquisitions and contracts and grant making, what they really are is just anti-white government employees. They're trained to avoid businesses that have white ownership. That's like the whole point of these gigs. And it's disgraceful, actually, that they're literally hiring the United States federal government, which is forbidden by law from this very behavior, is hiring people to use racial prejudice as a standard for awarding government money.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, it does seem like after the election, especially, even a lot of people on the left are saying we kind of went overboard in the last couple of years. Maybe DEI is kind of crazy. There's all these studies showing it doesn't actually improve anything. And yet the Biden administration is doubling down. And it does seem like an effort to just kind of subvert. Like maybe Biden's people actually know these jobs are useless, and they're just doing it as a form of sabotage. In the same way that Biden nominally told people they needed to come back to work and stop working from home.
Yeah.
And yet at the last second, he signs union contracts locking them in through the Trump presidency working from home. Because it's a good way to cripple the federal workforce if you have them all basically doing nothing.
How eager do you think the left is right now to cause mass disruption to Trump's incoming presidency?
I have no idea about that. We haven't seen any riots or anything yet, but I think personnel is policy, and getting a handle on the federal workforce is going to be key. Calling them back to the office, even if it's just a way to get people to quit because they've secretly moved from West Virginia and have been living a good life for a couple of years. Tell them they have to show up, and then suddenly they can't unless they want to move back here again. And you've gotten rid of some of these employees, but. Certainly if the government matters, which is what the left tells us, is that these agencies are doing important things, then we must have the people there doing important things. We don't have the positions to waste on this nonsense. And even there's a ton of like equal employment, people whose job it is to field complaints from other government employees about how their workplace is racist. So every little agency, even the National Indian Gaming Commission, is seeking a full-time EEOC person right now So I don't know what racial issues there could even be at the National Indian Gaming Commission, but they're everywhere. The National Geospatial Intelligence Agency is right at this very moment trying to hire, quote, many EEO officers. So they don't even say the number, it's just many. Like, how many people do you need? If you're getting this many complaints from employees that your own agency is racist, either this process is just being completely abused, or maybe the agency is racist and we should shut it down.
Yeah. Oh, man. This is, again, I can't say it often enough because it's true. President Trump and company can't get here soon enough. In the meantime, thank you, Luke Rosiak, for your time today. Merry Christmas to you. Grateful for your reporting, as always, sir. All right, coming up, we're going to give you some updates on what's going on Capitol Hill. Supposedly, they've got a new deal, new spending package Republicans are beginning to agree to. We'll take a closer look at what that even means. And President Trump is now going toe-to-toe with some Republican lawmakers. We'll share the details there, too. In the meantime, your calls coming in, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Nora calling in from Fairfax, line 1. Nora, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Colonnese Show.
Yes. Hello, Vince. How are you?
I'm doing well. Nora, what's on your mind?
Well, I was just going to say that if the Trump administration wants to try to eliminate some of these positions, I think they're just going to slide these people into other jobs and have them perform the basic functions that they were hired for under a new title. That could easily be done.
The DEI people. So if
the DEI folks.
Right. So if President Trump was to get rid of them, you
different.
think that they're going to just sort of shuffle them into, meaning the agencies are going to try and conceal these people and their agenda from President Trump.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah.
I could easily see that. Couldn't you?
Yeah, I could easily see that. The government agencies being meddlesome, out of sight of the American people, and undermining the President of the United States. Yeah, that's become a routine thing, quite unfortunately. And here you have the Biden administration now, according to Luke Rosiak's excellent reporting, just alone attempting right now to hire as many as 1,200 employees to join the federal government to be a part of so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion jobs, which, of course, every one of those words is a lie when it comes to what they're actually up to.
Right. That's very strange.
Yeah, big time. Thank you, Nora. Yes, Nora is as cynical as the rest of us should be about this, which is that once the federal government gets people like that in, they're going to smuggle them around, try and prevent them from being held accountable, which is not good at all. Let's see. I've got Todd calling in from Rockville right now, line 3. Hello, Todd. You're on the Vince Colonnese Show.
Hey, Vince. Good afternoon. So a couple of things. So I had sent a couple of newly posted DEI billets to Doge on X that had gone up only 3 weeks ago. One thing we should have, for instance, is right after election, there should be a complete freeze on filling any billets in the U.S. government. I can tell you factually that there are federal employees right now who have self-promoted themselves to higher up positions on the GS ladder, to a assistant deputy position ahead of the new administration coming in case their job gets downgraded, or to get them at a higher salary level, and it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's bordering on fraud what's going on.
Todd, how do you promote yourself? How does that work?
Right. Well, there's an example why someone needs to look at OPM, because there was no uniform standard for each of the executive agencies and how they promote their people. They don't have to go through the same process to move up the ladder. And I'm not going to name the agency, but my partner's boss basically self-promoted herself to a assistant deputy position, a week ago. And, staff was like, how the heck does this happen? How does this person get to do this?
And that was in preparation. That was in preparation for an incoming Trump administration.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. I mean, it's not that unbelievable. It's appalling, but not shocking. I guess that's once again where we are. Hey, Todd, thank you. That's an amazing feature, isn't it, of the federal government? You can promote yourself. What a completely different sector we're dealing with than the private sector. Doesn't usually work that way. I mean, unless you own the business and then you just come up with some fancy new title. That's what happens You're the chief executive. You're the emperor. Whatever you want to call yourself. If it's your business, just keep on creating new titles. I gave myself a promotion. Coming up on the program, we'll tell you the latest about how the government is trying to prevent a so-called government shutdown. And Congressman Ralph Norman joins us in the next hour to discuss that as well. Stay with us.